This is a story about a woman who controlled an emperor for 40 years. You will learn how a slave became the most powerful woman in the Ottoman Empire, how she manipulated the most feared man on earth, how she used 6 specific methods to rewrite history. This is the story of Hurrem Sultan. You are standing in the throne room of Topkapi Palace, Istanbul, 1566. Suleiman the Magnificent is dying. He is 71 years old. He has ruled the Ottoman Empire for 46 years. He conquered Belgrade, Rhodes, Hungary. He reached the gates of Vienna. He commanded armies of 300,000 men. He controlled 3 continents. Kings trembled at his name. Emperors sent him tribute. His word was law from Baghdad to Budapest. He was the most powerful man on earth. And for the last 40 years of his life, he was controlled by a woman who started as a slave. Her name was Hurrem Sultan. Before we go any further, there is something you need to understand about absolute power. It makes men untouchable, isolated, paranoid. Everyone around them is either afraid or scheming. No one tells them the truth. No one makes them laugh. No one treats them like a human being. How do you control someone like that? You cannot threaten them. You cannot bribe them. You cannot force them. But you can make yourself necessary. Emotionally, politically, psychologically. One woman did this for 40 years. And she did it so effectively that even after her death, Suleiman never recovered. This is not a love story. This is a case study in manipulation. Hurrem Sultan was born Alexandra Lisovska, probably in 1502, in a small town in what is now Ukraine. She was kidnapped by Crimean Tatars, sold in a slave market, and given to Suleiman's mother as a gift. She entered the harem around 1520, 4th-rank concubine, the lowest level. No political connections, no family, no wealth, nothing. By 1534, she was Suleiman's legal wife, the first sultan's wife in 300 years of Ottoman history. By 1558, when she died, she had rewritten the rules of power in the Ottoman Empire. But here is what makes her story remarkable. It was not luck. It was not just beauty. It was not simply being in the right place at the right time. It was systematic, deliberate, calculated. She used 6 specific methods to control the most powerful man on earth. Methods that worked for 4 decades. Methods that changed an empire. If this kind of analysis interests you, hit the like button. Subscribe, and in the comments, tell me which of the 6 methods you think was the most effective, or the most ruthless. This channel exists to expose the mechanisms of domination that shaped history in ways romantic stories prefer to ignore. Let me show you exactly how Hurrem Sultan controlled Suleiman the Magnificent for 40 years. Method 1. Make him laugh. Everyone feared the Sultan. She made him laugh. That is how she won. Here is what you need to understand about Suleiman's life. He became Sultan at age 26. From that moment, everything changed. Every conversation was calculated. Every smile was strategy. Every person who approached him wanted something. His advisors feared him. His soldiers worshipped him, but from a distance. His other concubines performed for him, gave him pleasure, but they were terrified of making a mistake. No one treated him like a human being. No one relaxed around him. No one made him laugh. According to Venetian ambassador reports from the 1530s, the Ottoman court was the most formal, most rigid, most terrifying place in the world. Dignitaries described meetings with Suleiman as experiences of pure fear. One wrong word, one incorrect gesture, and you could be executed. Hurrem understood something that the other concubines did not. Suleiman did not need another beautiful face. The harem had hundreds of beautiful faces. He did not need another skilled musician. He had the best in the world. He needed someone who made him feel human. Contemporary chronicles describe Hurrem as witty, sharp, bold. She was called Hurrem, which means the cheerful one or the laughing one. That was not her slave name. That was the name Suleiman gave her because she made him happy. But it was not just humor. It was the right kind of humor. She was intelligent. She understood politics. She could discuss military strategy. She spoke multiple languages. But more importantly, she knew how to use all of that to make him smile. Picture this. Suleiman returns from a long day of council meetings. Every decision has been about death, war, taxes, rebellions, the executions. He enters his private chambers expecting what he always gets. Silence. There, they still moving, dead, Hurrem is there. And she says something that makes him laugh. She says imitates one of his pompous advisors. Maybe she points out something absurd about court protocol. And maybe she tells him a story from the harem that is funny, but also clever enough to show she understands power. She gives him relief. Not just physical pleasure, emotional relief. And here is what makes this brilliant. She does not do this by being frivolous. She does not pretend to be stupid. She does not play the fool. She is sharp, observant, quick-witted. She understands exactly what is happening in his world, but she reframes it in ways that make it bearable. That is a very specific skill. It requires intelligence to be funny about power. It requires courage to make jokes to an absolute ruler. It requires emotional intelligence to know exactly how far you can push. And Hurrem had all three. According to the Venetian ambassador Bernardo Navigero, who visited Istanbul in the 1530s, Hurrem was described as having great vivacity and cheerfulness. He noted that Suleiman's mood visibly improved when she was present. Think about what that did psychologically. Every other person in Suleiman's life was either afraid of him or using him. Hurrem was the only person who treated him like he was just a man. Not a god, not a monster, just a man who needed to laugh. That created dependency. When you are surrounded by fear and calculation every single day, the one person who makes you feel normal becomes irreplaceable. Suleiman had access to any woman in the empire, but Hurrem was the only one who made him feel relaxed, happy, free. She became emotionally necessary, and that was just the first layer. Method 2. Give him sons. She gave him 5 sons. Her rival gave him 1. In the Ottoman succession system, that was not romance. That was mathematics. The Ottoman Empire had a brutal law. When a sultan died, his sons fought for the throne. The winner killed all his brothers. This was legal, expected, necessary to prevent civil war. This meant that having sons was not just about legacy. It was about survival, about power, about insurance. Hurrem understood this perfectly. Her main rival in the harem was Mahidevran, Suleiman's first love, the mother of his oldest son, Mustafa. According to the harem rules, Mahidevran should have been untouchable. She had given birth to a son. She was a haseki, a favorite. In theory, she had secured her position. But she had one fatal weakness. She only had one son. Hurrem had 6 children. 5 sons survived to adulthood, 1 daughter. Let's do the mathematics. Mahidevran's power was concentrated in one person. If Mustafa died, she had nothing. If Mustafa became sultan, she became Valide Sultan, the most powerful woman in the empire. But it all depended on one life. Hurrem had 5 sons, 5 separate chances at the throne, 5 separate sources of power, 5 different futures where she remained relevant. Each pregnancy renewed her importance to Suleiman. Each son was proof that she was fertile, valuable, essential to the dynasty. But there was something even more calculated about this strategy. Let's break down the timeline, because timing matters. Her first son, Mehmed, was born in 1521, just 1 year after she entered the harem. This secured her position as a haseki, a favorite. She now had status, but she did not stop. Her daughter Mehrima was born in 1522. Her second son Selim in 1524. Her third son Bayezid in 1525. Her fourth son Cihangir in 1531. 5 sons over 10 years. Each birth reinforcing her centrality to Suleiman's life. And here is what made this strategic genius. Every time she was pregnant, she was untouchable. You cannot exile a pregnant woman. You cannot diminish her importance when she is carrying the Sultan's child. You cannot replace her when her belly is proof of her value. She weaponized pregnancy. And each son was not just another child. Each son was another insurance policy, another claim to the throne, another reason Suleiman could not afford to lose her. Compare this to Mahidevran, 1 son, born in 1515, then nothing. Mahidevran gave Suleiman 1 heir, and according to the rules, was never supposed to share his bed again. Mustafa was brilliant, capable, beloved. But Mahidevran's entire future depended on that one person. Hurrem had diversified. She had built redundancy. She had created a situation where even if 1 son died, and they did, children died frequently in the 16th century, she still had others. This was not motherhood. This was portfolio management. The harem rule said that a concubine could only bear 1 son and then would never share the Sultan's bed again. Hurrem broke that rule. Again and again. She kept having children. Why did Suleiman allow this? With a mounting undercurrent of significance. Because by the time she was pregnant with her second son, she had already made herself emotionally necessary. He did not want to give her up, so he bent the rules. Then he broke them entirely. In 1534, Suleiman did something unprecedented in Ottoman history. He married her. Legally, publicly, with a ceremony. Ottoman sultans did not marry their concubines. This had been the rule for 3 centuries. Marriage was for foreign princesses, for political alliances, not for slaves. But Suleiman married Hurrem, and once she was his legal wife, the harem rules no longer applied to her. She was not a concubine anymore. She was the Sultan's wife. She could have as many children as she wanted. And she had secured her position through pregnancy. Then she had secured her status through marriage. Then she had secured her power through multiple sons. This was not about love. This was about building an empire within an empire. And she was just getting started. Method 3. Eliminate rivals. Mahidevran made one mistake. She physically attacked Hurrem in the harem. Hurrem turned that mistake into total victory. Let's be clear about what Hurrem was facing in the early 1520s. Mahidevran was Suleiman's first love, the mother of his first son. She had been in the harem longer. She had more allies. She had the support of Suleiman's mother, the Valide Sultan. Hurrem was a newcomer, a slave girl, ranked 4th. In a normal harem hierarchy, Mahidevran should have crushed her. But then something happened that changed everything. According to multiple contemporary sources, Mahidevran attacked Hurrem physically. The exact details vary, but the accounts agree that there was a violent confrontation. Mahidevran scratched Hurrem's face, pulled her hair, assaulted her in front of other concubines. Why did Mahidevran do this? Because she was losing. She could see Suleiman's attention shifting to Hurrem. She could see the younger woman gaining influence. And she panicked. The attack was an act of desperation. And Hurrem weaponized it. She did not fight back. She did not scream. She did not threaten. She went to Suleiman with her face scratched and bleeding, and she cried. Think about the psychology of that moment. Suleiman sees the woman who makes him laugh, the woman who makes him feel human, injured and upset. And who hurt her? His previous favorite, the mother of his oldest son. Hurrem did not have to say anything. The situation spoke for itself. But here is where it gets brilliant. She did not demand that Mahidevran be punished. She did not ask for revenge. She simply said she could not stay in the harem anymore. Not if Mahidevran was there. It was not safe. She made Suleiman choose. And Suleiman chose Hurrem. Mahidevran was sent away from Istanbul. Permanently. She was reassigned to Manisa, a provincial city, along with her son Mustafa. They were given a governor's palace. Comfortable. Respected. But they were no longer in the capital. No longer at the center of power. No longer in Suleiman's daily life. This was psychological genius. Hurrem made herself look like the victim. She made Mahidevran look unstable, violent, dangerous. And she forced Suleiman to remove the threat without making it look like her idea. Mahidevran never returned to Istanbul. She lived in Manisa for the rest of her life, watching from a distance as Hurrem consolidated power. But eliminating Mahidevran was just the beginning. There were other threats, other rivals, other people who questioned Hurrem's growing influence. And one by one, over the next 30 years, Hurrem removed them all. Method 4. Create dependency through letters. Suleiman spent years on military campaigns. Hurrem spent those years writing letters. Hundreds of letters. Each one a thread binding him to her. Here is the problem Hurrem faced. Suleiman was a warrior sultan. He personally led military campaigns. He would leave Istanbul for months, sometimes years, to fight wars in Hungary, Persia, the Mediterranean. When a sultan was away, his concubines waited. They had no contact with him. They had no influence. They simply existed in the harem until he returned. Hurrem refused to accept that. She began writing letters to Suleiman during his campaigns. Constantly. Prolifically. Hundreds of these letters survive today in the Ottoman archives, and they reveal something extraordinary. They letters have two layers. The surface layer, I cannot live without you. Hidden layer is plotting against you. She weaponized romance to deliver intelligence. The surface layer is romantic, passionate. She writes things like, "My Sultan, I cannot sleep when you are away. My days are empty without you. Like count the hours until your return." This kept her emotionally present. While he was thousands of miles away, commanding armies, she was in his thoughts. Every time a messenger brought a letter, she was there. But underneath the romance, there was something else. Political intelligence. In the same letters where she professed love, she also told him what was happening in Istanbul. Who was meeting with whom? Which viziers were forming alliances? Which advisors might be plotting against him? Here is an example from a surviving letter, written around 1534. "My Sultan, I live only for the day of your return, but I must tell you that your vizier has been holding private meetings with the Venetian ambassador. I do not know what they discuss, but it troubles me." She positioned herself as his eyes in the capital, his spy, his informant. And she was often right. The information she provided was accurate, useful, actionable. So Suleiman started to rely on her letters, not just for emotional comfort, but for political intelligence. Think about what this did psychologically. When Suleiman was on campaign, surrounded by generals and advisors who were all jockeying for position, who could he trust absolutely? The men around him had their own agendas, their own ambitions, their own reasons to lie. But Hurrem's only agenda was him. At least, that is what she made him believe. She became his emotional anchor and his political advisor simultaneously. Even when they were apart, she was in his mind, constantly, influencing decisions, shaping his perceptions. This created a dependency that went beyond physical presence. By the 1540s, Suleiman was making political decisions based on information Hurrem provided in her letters. He was asking for her advice. He was trusting her judgment over his own viziers. She had turned correspondence into control. Method 5. Isolate him from advisors. His closest friend since childhood was Ibrahim Pasha. Suleiman loved him like a brother. Hurrem convinced him to kill him. Let's talk about Ibrahim Pasha. He was Suleiman's best friend. They grew up together. Ibrahim was Greek, captured as a child, raised in the palace. He and Suleiman were inseparable. When Suleiman became sultan, he made Ibrahim his grand vizier, the highest position in the empire after the sultan himself. They were so close that Suleiman married Ibrahim to his own sister. That is how much he trusted him. But Ibrahim had one fatal flaw. He opposed Hurrem's influence. Ibrahim understood what Hurrem was doing. He saw her accumulating power. He saw her influence over Suleiman growing. And he tried to warn Suleiman. Big mistake. Hurrem began a campaign against Ibrahim that lasted years. It was subtle, patient, methodical. She did not openly attack him. She could not. Ibrahim was too powerful, too loved by Suleiman. Instead, she planted doubts. In her letters, she would mention things like, "I heard that Ibrahim has been building a palace larger than yours. Perhaps I am mistaken. People in the market are saying that Ibrahim acts more like a sultan than a vizier. But surely they are wrong. Small things, innocent observations, never direct accusations." But each one planted a seed. She amplified Suleiman's natural paranoia. And sultans were always paranoid. They had to be. Betrayal was constant. Coups were real. Suleiman's own father had faced rebellions. So when Hurrem suggested that Ibrahim was becoming too ambitious, too independent, too powerful, it resonated. She also worked on Ibrahim's enemies. The empire was full of people who resented Ibrahim's power. Viziers who wanted his position. Generals who disagreed with his military strategies. Hurrem cultivated these people. She gave them access to Suleiman. She amplified their complaints. And slowly, over years, the circle tightened. By 1536, Suleiman's trust in Ibrahim was crumbling. And then, in March 1536, Ibrahim was invited to dinner at the palace. He never left. That night, on Suleiman's orders, Ibrahim Pasha was strangled. His body was buried quietly. No trial, no public execution, no explanation. Suleiman's closest friend, his advisor since childhood, the man he had loved like a brother, dead, because Hurrem convinced him it was necessary. And it did not stop with Ibrahim. After Ibrahim's execution in 1536, a pattern emerged. Any advisor who questioned Hurrem's influence mysteriously fell out of favor. Some were dismissed. Some were reassigned to distant provinces. Some simply disappeared. Let's look at the evidence. Grand Vizier Ayas Pasha, who succeeded Ibrahim, initially resisted Hurrem's influence. He lasted 3 years before being replaced. Grand Vizier Lutfi Pasha married Hurrem's daughter Mihrima, thinking this would secure his position. But when he disagreed with Hurrem on a policy matter, he was forced to resign in 1541. The pattern was clear. Oppose Hurrem, lose your position. Support Hurrem, advance your career. By the 1540s, nearly every major position in the Ottoman government was held by someone who owed their appointment to Hurrem's support, or who understood that their survival depended on not crossing her. She had essentially created a shadow government. Suleiman still made the final decisions, but the information he received, the advice he was given, the options presented to him, all of that was filtered through people loyal to Hurrem. This is how you control an absolute monarch without holding any official position. You control access. You control information. You control the people around him. And slowly, imperceptibly, Suleiman became more and more isolated from anyone who might tell him the truth about what Hurrem was doing. By the late 1540s, there was almost no one left in Suleiman's inner circle who remembered what the court was like before Hurrem. No one who could point out how much had changed. No one who could warn him. She had isolated him completely. She convinced a father to kill his own son, and the son was innocent. This is the darkest part of Hurrem's story. This is where manipulation becomes murder. Let's establish the facts. Mustafa was Mahidevran's son. Suleiman's firstborn. By all accounts, he was brilliant, capable, popular with the army, skilled in politics and military strategy. He was the obvious heir, the best heir. Everyone knew it, because if Mustafa became Sultan, Ottoman law was clear. He would execute all of his brothers to prevent civil war, which meant Hurrem's sons would die. All of them. This was not paranoia. This was how the system worked. Fratricide was legal, expected, necessary. So Hurrem had a choice. Let Mustafa inherit and watch her sons be killed, or remove Mustafa and put one of her sons on the throne. She chose the second option, but she could not simply kill Mustafa. He was too powerful, too loved, and Suleiman adored him. So she launched a campaign that took years. She started whispering to Suleiman that Mustafa was becoming too popular with the Janissaries, too beloved by the army, too powerful in his governorship. My Sultan, the soldiers love Mustafa more than they love you. Is that not dangerous? And it was not entirely untrue. Mustafa was popular. The Janissaries did respect him. He was an effective governor. But popularity is not the same as disloyalty. Hurrem spent years turning virtue into threat. Every report of Mustafa's success in governance became evidence of his ambition. Every time the soldiers praised Mustafa's military skill became proof of his plans to seize power. Every meeting Mustafa had with foreign ambassadors became a conspiracy against the Sultan. She found allies in this campaign. Other sons, other mothers, other factions in the court who had their own reasons to want Mustafa removed. And she was patient. This was not a quick strike. This was a decade-long campaign of systematic character assassination. By the early 1550s, Suleiman was receiving regular reports about Mustafa's suspicious activities. Forged letters supposedly showing Mustafa's correspondence with foreign powers. Testimony from servants claiming they had overheard Mustafa plotting rebellion. None of it was real, but all of it was plausible. Because here is what made Mustafa vulnerable. He was too perfect, too popular, too obviously the best choice for Sultan. And that made him a threat. Not because he was disloyal, but because his mere existence was a challenge to Suleiman's authority. Hurrem understood this. She exploited Suleiman's deepest fear, the fear that he would be overthrown by his own son, just as his grandfather had been. None of this was true. Mustafa was loyal, but Hurrem was patient. She found people who would provide evidence of Mustafa's treachery. Forged letters, false testimony from servants. She exploited Suleiman's paranoia, his fear of being overthrown, his knowledge that his own grandfather had been deposed by his son. And slowly, over years, she convinced him. In 1553, Suleiman was on campaign in Persia. Mustafa was summoned to his father's tent. He came willingly. He trusted his father. He had no reason to fear. When he entered the tent, mute executioners were waiting. They strangled him with a bowstring. In front of Suleiman, Mustafa was 38 years old, innocent, loyal, the best heir the Ottoman Empire would ever have. And his father murdered him because Hurrem convinced him it was necessary. According to contemporary accounts, Suleiman watched his son die. And then he left the tent and continued the campaign as if nothing had happened. But something did happen. Something broke in Suleiman that day. Later historical sources suggest that Suleiman regretted Mustafa's death for the rest of his life, that he never fully recovered from it. that he knew deep down that he had been manipulated. But it was too late. Mustafa was dead. Hurrem's sons were safe. And the Ottoman Empire had just lost its most capable heir. Because when Suleiman eventually died in 1566, the Sultan who inherited the throne was Selim II, Hurrem's son. Selim the drunkard. Selim the incompetent. He was a disaster. Weak. Uninterested in governance. More concerned with wine than war. The empire began its long decline under Selim, and it would never recover the strength it had under Suleiman. Hurrem had won, but the empire lost. Hurrem Sultan died on April 15, 1558. She was 56 years old. She died still as Suleiman's wife, still the most powerful woman in the Ottoman Empire, still surrounded by luxury and influence. By most metrics, she won. She controlled an emperor for 40 years, but her sons killed each other. The empire declined. She lived in constant fear. Victory. But at what cost? She rose from slave to sultana. She broke 3 centuries of tradition. She gave birth to a sultan. She controlled the most powerful man on earth for 40 years. But let's count the costs. First, her children. She had 6 children. 2 of them died violently. Mehmed, her eldest son, died in 1543 at age 22. Officially from disease, but some sources suggest poison. Bayezid, one of her middle sons, rebelled against his brother Selim after Suleiman's death. Selim had him hunted down and executed, along with Bayezid's 5 sons, Hurrem's grandsons. So Hurrem fought for 40 years to put her sons on the throne, and those same sons killed each other the moment Suleiman was gone. Second, the empire. Mustafa's death removed the Ottoman Empire's best hope for continued strength. Selim II was a weak sultan. His reign marked the beginning of Ottoman decline. Historians debate whether the empire would have remained strong under Mustafa. We will never know, but we know what happened under Selim. Stagnation, military defeats, loss of territory. Hurrem's manipulation changed the trajectory of an entire civilization, and not for the better. Third, Suleiman himself. After Mustafa's execution, something changed in Suleiman. Contemporary observers noted that he became more withdrawn, more melancholy, less decisive. He continued to campaign, continued to rule, but the fire was gone. In 1566, during a campaign in Hungary, Suleiman died in his tent. He was 71 years old. According to reports, his final words were regrets about decisions he had made, about people he had trusted, about the son he had killed. He never remarried after Hurrem's death in 1558, never took another wife, never even took another concubine to his bed. He remained faithful to her memory for 8 years after she died. She had created such complete emotional dependency that even death did not break it. Fourth, Hurrem herself. She lived in constant paranoia. She had to. The harem was full of rivals. The court was full of enemies. She had made too many people angry, destroyed too many careers, eliminated too many threats. She could never relax, never trust anyone completely, except perhaps her own children. And even they competed with each other. She was sultana, but she was still captive, still living in the system that had enslaved her, just in a nicer cage. And her legacy? Controversial forever. In Turkey, she is seen differently depending on who you ask. Some view her as a powerful woman who broke barriers. Others view her as a manipulator who destroyed the empire. In Ukraine, where she was born, she is sometimes celebrated as a Ukrainian woman who rose to power. But that erases the fact that she was kidnapped and enslaved. The romantic stories turn her into a love story. The nationalist narratives turn her into a symbol. The historical records show something more complicated. She was brilliant, ruthless, strategic, effective. But effectiveness is not the same as morality. So let's answer the question. Did Hurrem Sultan win? If we measure victory by what she achieved, the answer is yes. She controlled the most powerful man on earth for 40 years. She broke unbreakable rules. She rose from the lowest possible position to the highest a woman could reach in the Ottoman system. She secured her bloodline on the throne. She accumulated wealth and power beyond imagination. She rewrote Ottoman history. By any measure of success, she won. But if we measure victory by what she lost, the answer is more complicated. 2 of her sons died violently. Her grandsons were executed. Her legacy is forever controversial. The empire she helped rule began its decline under her son, and she lived her entire life in fear, in paranoia, in a golden cage that was still a cage. So did she win? Or did the system win by forcing her to destroy herself and others to survive? Here is what we know for certain. Hurrem Sultan proved that you can control absolute power, that manipulation works, that a woman with nothing can, through intelligence and ruthlessness, dominate an emperor. The 6 methods she used: make him laugh, give him sons, eliminate rivals, create dependency through letters, isolate him from advisors, and control succession through murder. These methods worked. With a sober undercurrent. They worked for 40 years. They changed an empire. They put her son on the throne. But they came with costs that she could not have anticipated. Costs that continued long after her death. Costs that the empire paid for generations. This raises a fundamental question about power and manipulation. If you can control absolute power, should you? If achieving your goals requires destroying others, is it worth it? If the only way to survive a brutal system is to become brutal yourself, what does that make you? Hurrem Sultan had no good choices. She was a slave in a system designed to prevent her from having power. She used the only tools available to her, and she used them brilliantly. But brilliance is not the same as righteousness. Effectiveness is not the same as morality, and victory is not the same as winning. Suleiman the Magnificent died in 1566, still faithful to Hurrem's memory. He never replaced her, never stopped loving her, never recovered from the decisions she convinced him to make. She controlled him until the day he died and beyond. That is power. Real power. The kind of power that survives death itself. But it is also tragedy, because both of them were captives, him of his throne, her of her ambition, both trapped in a system that destroyed everyone it touched. The romantic stories call it love. The historians call it manipulation. The truth is probably both. Still impressed by her will, Hurrem Sultan spent 40 years manipulating the most powerful man on earth. She won every battle. She achieved every goal. But in the end, what did she gain? Power without freedom, victory without peace, success without safety. Maybe that is the real cost of controlling absolute power. Not that you fail, but that you succeed, and then you have to live with what you have done. If this exposed something about how manipulation works at the highest levels of power, and what it costs to use it, do 3 things. 1. Hit the like button. 2. Subscribe and turn on notifications. 3. Leave a comment answering this question. Which of the 6 methods was the most effective? Make him laugh? Give him sons? Eliminate rivals? Control through letters? Isolate advisors? Or kill the heir? And the harder question, if you could control absolute power through manipulation, but it required destroying innocent people and living in constant paranoia, would you do it? Hurrem Sultan answered yes, and history still debates whether she was right. The methods worked. The power was real. The control was absolute. But the question remains, was it worth it? That is for you to decide.